Hello, friends and neighbors. Let's talk about life decisions today. How are we going to raise our children? Stay tuned.
Welcome to A Word for Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Each Wednesday, you will find Boggs Family Ministries is here with our host, Davy Boggs. Having you along with us is a wonderful addition. Now, let's enjoy together A Word for Wednesday.
Thank you, Brother Devin, and thank you for joining us on A Word for Wednesday. I'm coming to you again with another edition of Life Decisions, making life decisions ahead of time. Thank you for all of the positive feedback that we have received on this series. I've talked to you about some of the life decisions that Kelly and I made ahead of time so we would not be put on a spot and make a bad decision in the moment. I have found that if I make a decision based only on circumstances, I am likely to make a bad decision. But if I can make that decision ahead of time based on biblical principles and our own moral values, then when I get in the heat of the moment, I don't have to make a decision and maybe make a wrong decision based on what's going on around me at the moment. But I've already made the decision, and it's a good one. So Kelly and I, we had a lot of discussions on how are we going to raise our children. Kelly and I were both raised in two-parent families. My mom, my dad are still married today. Been married almost 60 years. Kelly's mom and dad still married today. Been married way over 50 years, closing in on 55 years. And we were abundantly blessed to be raised in homes like that. I'm sure that not everything was perfect in Kelly's family. I'm sure not everything was perfect in my family, but we were blessed to be raised in a family with a dad that went to work, and sometimes a mom that went to work, but a mom that was always working at home, and brothers and sisters around us in a nuclear family. But we had to make decisions on our own. How are we going to raise our children? And the first thing we decided, we made this decision ahead of time, not knowing how severely it would be tested and how important it was, but we decided we're going to be on the same page. Now, Kelly and I are two different people. We've been one as husband and wife for nearly 40 years, but we're two different people with two different minds and two different ways of thinking about things. That's just the facts of life. That's who we are. That's who every marriage is, two different people. Just because we said I do doesn't mean we think the same. But when it came to raising children, we decided the best thing to do is to be on the same page so that when we come to a discipline issue, when we come to a moral dilemma, when we come to a question about how to do things, we may not always make the right decision, but Kelly and I have decided before Odie was born, we're going to be in agreement. We're going to come to an agreement. And so sometimes we've went Kelly's way, but it was the way that was best. And I said, I'm getting on board. Sometimes we went my way, and it proved to be the best. And she said, I'm going to get on board. Sometimes we came to a wonderful compromise and said, this is it. But when Odie tried to play us against each other, and all kids do that, there was nothing inherently evil about Odie more than any other kid. But when Mommy said, Daddy said, no, we're on the same page. We felt like our children needed to see that we were a united front. And so that's a decision we made ahead of time. And when the test came, sometimes we had to retreat to another part of the house and talk it through to ourselves, among Kelly and I, and say, how are we going to handle this with Odie? How are we going to deal with this situation? And then we came out with a unified front. This is what we're going to do, Odie. This is what daddy says. This is what mommy says. And this is what's going to happen. And it has worked out pretty well. And number two, in raising our children, we decided, along with the decision I already talked about, that we're taking our daughter to church. Now, Odie was in the hospital the first 27 days of her life. She was actually in intensive care those whole 27 days. She went straight from intensive care home. And the very next Sunday morning, we were in church. Now, she was mostly past the danger stage. She was right at 5 pounds when we took her home, up from 3 pounds and 9 ounces. But our pastor said to the congregation, now, the little baby is very delicate. She's premature. Try not to get right in her face. And we appreciated that. He was looking out for our best interest and looking out for our baby. But we decided we're going to church. And when the booster band went up to sing, and they knelt down at the altar and they sang, "Come into my heart. Come into my heart. Come into my heart, Lord Jesus. Come in today. Come in to stay. Come into my heart." Oh, yeah. I took Odie right up there. She wasn't big enough to sing it. She's 5 pounds, 30-something days old. But I took her up there, and I knelt at the altar, and I laid her right on that altar, and I sang it for her because we made a decision. Our little girl's going to be raised in the house of God. She's going to be there when they're singing. She's going to be there when they're worshiping. She's going to be there to hear the preaching. She's going to be there when there is rejoicing. She's going to be there when there is shouting. She's going to be there when there is dancing. She's going to be there. She's going to be a church kid. And we took her to church all her life. I may have told you this before, but one day, Odie and I went out to eat by ourselves. This has been well over 20 years ago. We were living in Wichita. And I said, "Odie, I don't remember what we were eating, but why aren't you eating your food?" She said, "Well, I'm going to finish this and then I'll move on to the next thing." I said, "You eat everything? One thing at a time?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I learned to eat in a car." You know, in a car, you have everything in the bag, and so you eat your French fries and you eat your hamburger, then you pick up your drink and you drink, because you can't juggle it all. Especially, I can't juggle it all as a grown up, but especially as a kid. And she did. She learned to eat in the car. We went to church. We went to revival. That's all Odie has ever known, and I don't feel a bit bad about it. She loves going to church. For 37 years, she's went to church. Some of those years, 360, 370 services. Some of those years had 7 or 8 camp meetings with 4 services a day. I mean, we have went to church. There was never any, Odie can stay home because she's tired. No, we're going to teach her to love the house of God. And thank God she does. Now, I know I see anecdotal evidence all the time. People tell me, "Oh, I took my kids to church. Now they hate church." And I don't know the answer to all that. Something in my mind says they hate church for some other reason, but I don't know. I can't judge that situation. I wouldn't be right to judge that situation. But I wanted to raise our daughter in church, and we did. And thirdly, we made a decision early on. We are going to raise her according to our understanding, our best understanding of what a biblical lifestyle is. We're going to raise her according to our values. We're going to raise her according to our interpretation of Scripture. We're not going to argue about it. We're not going to fuss about it. We're not going to fuss among ourselves. We're not going to fuss with friends and family. We're not going to tell them how to raise their kids. We're not going to preach at them all the time about what they're doing wrong. We're just going to do what we feel like is the best thing to do. And so we did. Just a few weeks after Odie was born, I went to work in a factory, and there were a few hundred men in that factory, and several of them, most of them were young men starting out, but 30 or 40 of them were older men from that factory who had actually put off their retirement, most of them, to come and train all these younger guys how to do their jobs. It was really nice. I mean, I had some great friends and great acquaintances and learned some great things from these guys. You know, you're talking about children and kids, and I worked with a guy that had 10 kids, and I worked with a guy that had 2 girls, and you know, just on and on and on. And so you talk about kids and how you raise your kids, and of course I was 18 and how I'm going to raise my kids. And the guy with 10 kids, he told me, he said, oh, he was so upset. He was so upset. Now he'd never met Odie. She was just a baby. He didn't know anything about her. He just knew she's a baby. He'd seen pictures of her. Cute little baby, cute little girl. He was so upset that she was not going to get to do some of the things that he thought in his family were mandatory rites of passage. She wasn't going to get to go to this, or she wasn't going to get to go to that, because we were going to raise her what he felt like was a very sheltered and restricted life. And he said to me in front of everybody, he was upset with me. He said, "You're gonna warp that little girl. She's gonna grow up warped." Well, he was 65, maybe 70, 37 years ago. So really, really good chance he's went on to his reward, whatever that was. And so I can't show him, but oh, I'd like him to see how warped that Odie is. I'd love for him to see the thousands of people that she has blessed by singing and testifying and being a godly, gracious girl. In fact, a godly, gracious woman. I'd love for him to see how warped she is. Now, we didn't get to raise 10 kids. We had our second girl a year and a half after Odie was born. She would be 35 now. Little Allie Elizabeth just lived a few hours. She was very, very premature. She was trying to be born for weeks and weeks and weeks before she was actually born. And we surrendered her back to God in just a few hours. I didn't get to raise little Allie. I'd love to. Oh, I'd love to. We always imagined that Allie was our high singer, because none of us can sing real high. Just let her sing the high part. Maybe sing like Karen Peck, you know, just way up there in the clouds somewhere. I don't know. I can't understand everything. We didn't get to raise Allie. We didn't get to raise all the other children we would have loved to have had. So I can't take any credit for being super number one dad, and neither can Kelly Jo take credit for being super spiritual number one mother. But we did the best we could. And I think it was valuable to make those decisions ahead of time. Are you struggling? Are you struggling? Sometimes it's better, rather than making those decisions on the fly, to make them ahead of time based on biblical principle. That's the best that we could do. And by the grace of God, at this point, Odie is doing very well, and we are extremely thankful for it. I hope that comes through clear. God bless you, friends. Thank you for joining us. That's our word for Wednesday. See you next week.
That is our word for Wednesday. We are so glad that you've spent a few minutes with us today. If you've been touched by today's episode, please share it with your friends and family. We welcome your questions or comments below or by email. You can find the email address in the description, along with a link to Mile Markers, the website for Boggs Family Ministries. Also, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next Wednesday.